I am truly honored and humbled to share this moment with you all and introduce such a wonderful individual. My name is Colleen Tonra. I am at Rutgers University, majoring in history and minoring in Asian American Studies. I am a second-year leadership scholar at the Institute for Women's Leadership, a senior peer instructor for the first-year interest group seminar program, also known as FIGS, a peer coordinator for the Asian American Cultural Center, and the founding president of Southeast Asians of Rutgers University. Much of my work currently, and as I look ahead as I enter the Rutgers Graduate School of Education, involves building safe spaces for vulnerable communities. If the Institute for Women's Leadership has taught me one thing, it's the importance of empathy in your advocacy. As we live in a post-Roe world where the future feels uncertain, bleak, and discouraging, it is imperative that we find solace and confidence in one another, especially trailblazers that have paved the way for women like me to be here with you today. Merle Hoffman's career, spanning over 50 years, is a story of resilience and love. 2 years before Roe v. Wade, Hoffman helped establish one of the first abortion clinics in the country, the forerunner to Choices Women's Medical Center in Flushing, Queens. Today, Choices continues to provide people with abortion care, birth control, gynecology, prenatal care, counseling services, telemedicine, specialized care for teens, trans people, and the LGBTQ community, along with extensive educational outreach to schools, prisons, and women's organizations. In 1976, Hoffman co-founded the National Abortion Federation and was its first president. She also founded the New York Pro-Choice Coalition in 1985. Hoffman is the publisher of On the Issues magazine, sharing progressive feminist news and opinion pieces since 1983. Merle Hoffman's continued decades of experience, research, and analysis are a testament to her dedication to serving women with safety, compassion, and love. I always believe that to be a woman in America is to empty your cup for others while trying to convince yourself and everyone around you that you're still full. Hoffman's life and work teach us that we are not all individual cups, but rather a collective that must comfort and uplift one another. Hoffman recounts in her 2012 memoir, Intimate Wars, how her time at Queens College exposed her to feminist activism and academics. Even when the going gets tough, I recognize the privilege I have to be at this institution surrounded by feminist activists that challenge the social injustices threatening our lives today. Now, Merle Hoffman has written Choices, a Post-Roe Abortion Rights Manifesto, detailing the catastrophic repercussions of overturning Roe v. Wade in 2022 and what we all need to do in order to secure our rights to bodily autonomy and safe, legal abortion access across the country. Copies of her new book, Choices, are available for free outside, and this event is presented by the Gloria Steinem Endowed Chair in Media, Culture, and Feminist Studies, Roxane Gay. In her position, Gay designs and teaches courses providing unique opportunities to connect students with professionals, focusing on gender equality and creating inclusive and democratic media. Now please join me in welcoming Merle Hoffman in a reading and Q&A on Making a Revolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that beautiful introduction. Talking about full cups, love, and revolution. Where my friend and longtime colleague, Charlotte Bunch, founded the Center for Women's Global Leadership 35 years ago. This is a wonderful example of feminist theory put into practice. And it's a real honor to have Roxane Gay here. She's a sister in arms in what I would call, or you call, bad feminist and a difficult woman. I always remember John Lewis. I had a dialogue with him, and he said, you have to make good trouble. And you've got to be willing to move. And as far as I'm concerned, good girls never make history. So we have to be bad, we have to be courageous, and we have to move, right? So, again, thank you for inviting me here tonight to speak to you about the women's health revolution, women's revolution, and how it has to continue to go and to flow. So, March has been a very, very busy month for abortion rights. First of all, on March 4th, France incorporated the right to legal abortion in their constitution. What an extraordinary thing. The only country in the world that has done this. Immediately, I thought to myself, I'm going to ask for political asylum in France. And I actually contacted an attorney to find out if I could do that. If the women in America could have standing, because we are in a political environment that really is oppressive and torturous. So I think we all need some kind of political asylum. So that's one of my creative ideas. We'll see if it ever comes into fruition. But unfortunately, in this country, the story is very, very different. Republicans released a budget that endorsed a national ban on abortion with no exceptions for rape or incest, a ban on mifepristone, the abortion pill, and shut off funding for contraception and recognized fetal personhood, which, by the way, is one of the main endpoints agenda for the anti-abortion movement. Republican lawmakers in Texas met with a group of advocates that wanted and advocated the death penalty for women who had abortions. Now, I want to read a comment that I read this morning in the Washington Post from Anya Cook, who nearly died after she was denied an abortion under Florida's existing 15-week ban in 2022, had a message today for women in the Sunshine State who now encounter pregnancy complications after the 6-week marks. Run, she said. Run, because you have no help here. The closest clinic where abortion will now be legal after the 6-week mark for someone living at Florida's southmost tip will be a 14-hour drive away in Charlotte. Patients whose pregnancies have progressed beyond 12 weeks, the point when North Carolina bans abortion, will have to drive 17 hours to get a legal, safe abortion. We are definitely living in a dystopian, patriarchal, theocratic, dangerous, controlling universe when it comes to women and women's health and women's reproductive care. So we're back to March, right, in March. A 12-year-old girl who became pregnant as a result of a rape is now at 13, a single mother of an 8-month-old child. Okay, now I want to talk about the rape exemption, because you think, why would they be so against having an exemption for rape? And I'll just read you this quote, so maybe it'll give you some insight into this. Years ago, in an interview with Paul Krasner, Ken Kesey, who is an American novelist, countercultural figure, declared himself against abortion. And Krasner asked if his objection applied to victims of rape. And Kesey replied, just because another man planted the seed, there's no reason to destroy the crop. This gives you some insight into thinking what women means to this anti-abortion movement, what we are, crop, vessel, venue for the fertilization of seeds and fetuses. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. What else happened in March? Alabama made embryos frozen for IV purposes into children. Remember that? This was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, right? They said, you know, a sperm and an egg has the picture, the imprimatur of God. Therefore, it is a child, and you cannot destroy it. Last week, an anti-abortion physician sued to curtail access to mifepristone. This was all over the paper. I think you must be aware of that case. They said that Supreme Court judges didn't seem to accept the anti-position. We'll see what comes down. A Texas woman who was wrongfully charged with murder after a self-managing abortion is suing the state for $1 million. And just yesterday, Just yesterday, the Florida Supreme Court overturned decades of legal precedent in ruling that the state constitution's privacy protection does not extend to abortion, allowing Florida to reduce the ability to have abortion to 6 weeks. 6 weeks, and that's going into the heartbeat bill. Do you remember that? When the doctors could hear a heartbeat, which really wasn't, but electrical impulses. And every time I talked about the heartbeat bill, I said, well, grown women, we have hearts. We have a heartbeat. But that's not what they were concerned about. Before legalization, there were 200,000, as many as 200,000 to 1 million abortions a year, illegal abortions a year. And it was terrifying contemplating needing one, right? Do you remember, or any of you remember, when abortion was illegal and you missed your period? And I remember praying that my period would come. So that was a terrible, terrible point. And they said there was about 200,000 to 1 million possible illegal abortions. Now, illegal abortions stopped in 5 states in 1970. And New York was the one who decriminalized it, okay? So I want you to think about this. Now, abortion was illegal for all these years, right? It was a crime, a sin, a terrible, terrible thing to do on Monday. Then on Tuesday, abortion becomes legal. And in the first year abortion was legal, 287,000 women flew into New York to have abortions. First year, 287,000 women. So it made me think about, and it made me wonder, how many women throughout the decades had pregnancies, were carrying pregnancies they did not want to come to term. But of course, they didn't have access to legal, safe abortion. So that's something to think about. At that time, in 1970, I was 24, 25 years old. I was studying to be a classical pianist. I had absolutely no political interest. I was reading philosophy. I decided to go to Paris to study music. I wasn't going to college. I went to music and art, and I said college was irrelevant. So I went to Paris, and I stayed and lived there for about a year, and I always laughed when I say I learned to love bread and cheese because it was the only thing I could afford to eat. And then, you know, reality set in, and I had to come back to New York. And I decided to go to Queens College, and a friend helped me first non-matriculate, then matriculate, then to NYU. And I had to work 3 jobs to put myself through college. And one was with a doctor who was very committed to providing legal abortions to the community. So I was working with him, and at one point he said, would you like to get involved in helping to create a clinic for women who want and are having abortions? And I said, and I thought, well, I know nothing about this. I wasn't involved in feminism. I think the only thing feminist I remember was seeing Gloria Steinem on television when she was talking about we're not calling ourselves Miss or Mrs. anymore. We're going to call ourselves Ms. So I really didn't have any idea of this. And I said, okay, you know, I will, because it seemed very meaningful and it seemed very pioneering, and I was terribly curious about it. So I decided to help and to get involved. So basically, my feminism, you see, came from the ground up. It came from dealing with and being with the women every day who came into the clinic. And my first patient was named Helen, and I actually have dedicated my book to her. I call her the catalyst of my calling. And of course, I left the book over this. I want to read a couple of, read a little from the book. Helen came from New Jersey because in 1971, abortion remained illegal, and in most of the country until the Roe ruling in 1973. She came in with her husband and one of her 3 children. I remember that she was visibly shaking with anxiety. Dr. Gold said to me, "Go in and talk to her." I was nervous too. No one had trained me. Legal abortion was an uncharted course full of morality, theology, philosophy, and politics. All topics I had studied, but I had no experience in dealing directly with the abortion patient herself. No one did. No one did. I thought to myself, what do I say? What do I do? The intellectual giants of psychology came into my mind, but Freud and Jung had nothing to say about dealing with the ultimate questions of existence, the woman's and the fetus's, in a medical setting. I went into the room, sat down, and told her up front that this was the first time I had done this. "We are pioneers in this new world of legal abortion," I said. "I'm going to talk to you about what the procedure involves and the physical, emotional, and psychological aspects of it. But let me first assure you that you're not going to die. You are in a safe, professional, medical space now." In the early days, abortion meant death or potentially life-altering complications. Indeed, the very first time I heard about an abortion when I was 16 years old, I overheard my parents whispering about a Philadelphia physician whose patient died when he was performing an illegal abortion. And to cover it up, the doctor cut the woman up and put her remains down the drain. Abortion for many people brought to mind images of death and disfigurement. People have been raised on movies with horrid and realistic illegal abortion scenes where women were dying or were butchered, or they lived only to be punished by society and made an example of. Helen told me it was impossible to have another child, that her family would be financially broken, and that she psychologically was totally unable to care for one more. I spoke with her husband, who was extremely supportive. At that time, we did not have the space or equipment for general anesthesia, which for many years was the reality in most clinics around the country. I told her the pain would be similar to period cramps and tried to reassure her. "I will stay with you," I said. I remember gently touching her hair and leaning in close and speaking softly into her ear, telling her she was making the right choice and that everything would be okay. During the procedure, I actually had to take my rings off because she was holding and squeezing my hand so tightly. After it was over, I had the profound experience of being in the recovery room with her as she expressed her relief and gratitude for just being alive and not pregnant. It was another epiphany. This is not a career. This is not a job. This is a mission. And then there was always another woman or little girl, another face, another set of eyes wide open with fear. There was in those early days so much fear, but the ability to look in those women's eyes and say, "It's over, you're not pregnant anymore," was and is a gift to them and to me, because in that moment, their life was given back to them. And now we're back in that situation again. So that was the day I decided, and I thought of myself as a warrior healer, W-A-R-R, not W-O-R-R, warrior healer. I've lived this struggle for reproductive rights and know it is a real war with real casualties from the enemies in my head. I said the enemies have outposts in my head. This stigma, constant stigma and shame. You're stupid, you didn't use the right birth control. Why are you having a second abortion? Why are you having all of this? All of this gets incorporated, and to the constant background music of shame and stigma when somebody comes in for an abortion. Over the 50 years that I've been at Choices, I've had death threats. My house was burned down. The FBI had to be called in. I have harassment, invasions. Now, in New York, in Jamaica, every Saturday and Friday, there are anti-abortionists surrounding the clinic screaming, "You're killing your baby, you're killing your baby." And if the patient may be black or coming in, "You are desecrating the legacy of Martin Luther King." I mean, they get very, very creative. They even tell some patients, "Here, aren't you thirsty? Have some water," when they're outside. And of course, if they have water, they can't have anesthesia. So this is going on now in New York at Choices. And I also have been, you've said some of the things with the activism. I debated Jerry Falwell, and have been accused of being Hitler, and all sorts of awful opprobriums that they've thrown at me, which always makes me stronger, you see. It's like the Nietzschean thing. It's not killing me. It's making me a lot stronger. So despite these constant battles, and I want to stress, for so many years, the pro-choice movement really believed that we were safe. And this is one of the main reasons that we are in the position that we are in today. Because we always have Roe. You see, whatever happened. Clinics were invaded, harassment, murders. A very dear friend of mine, Dr. George Tiller, was shot in the head in his church in Kansas on a Sunday where he was a deacon because he was doing late-term abortions. So that was going on. And with whatever was happening, there was this very, very deep feeling that we will always have Roe because the law has to stand, you see. We believed in that. But it didn't stand, did it? It didn't stand, it collapsed. And now we are left playing a horrendously defensive battle. So for a long time, I personally have believed that the constitutional basis for Roe, the right to privacy, was the wrong substantiation for it. I had the chance at one point in time in 2008 to question Ruth Bader Ginsburg about this, and she agreed, and she stated that, "I've criticized the court decision in Roe, not for the result, but because the decision is heavily oriented to doctors. It is the doctor's choice as much as the woman's. Abortion isn't just some private act. It's a woman's right to control her own life. The notion of a woman's autonomy to determine her life's course." In my book, I consider also whether the fetus is a woman's property and discuss the work of feminist lawyer, ethicist Anita Bernstein. I don't know whether any of you know of her, but she does very creative work on these issues. And Bernstein argues, that the common law, often associated with the interests of conservative old white men, is actually a powerful source of liberty for women. The common law's central command is that people, including women, are free to say, "do not want," with respect to their bodies, their money, and their property. So these traditional conservative principles can justify a woman's right to refuse unwanted sexual penetration and unwanted pregnancy. So I would say if there are any legal students here or anybody who's considering going into the law, think creatively and think about these legal things that we can do, that the movement can do to try and oppose or move ahead the idea of getting legal abortion nationwide, because the point is we have to have abortion without borders, not state by state. The right to vote is not state by state. The right to assemble, the right to religious freedom, all of these are transcendent human and civil rights, just as the right to reproductive justice. We lost Roe, and I always say this because we did not follow the first principle of war, which is never underestimate your enemies. And we continually underestimated them. In the beginning, I remember, when they started to demonstrate out of choices, and they would wear plastic, fetal feet, or have little crosses and create cemeteries. Everybody laughed at them. It was very funny. It's not funny anymore. They've actually put their agenda all over this country. And please don't put your trust in the Democrats or only in voting. I'm not saying don't vote, but remember, look at the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment was passed in 1976. It took away Medicaid funding for poor Black and minority women, and it is still in effect. And it can be taken away by the president just by stroke of his pen. But it went through Clinton, it went through Obama, and it's still with Biden. And let me talk a little about Biden. He's a little wishy-washy on this issue. One recent quote, "I have never been supportive of, it's my body and I can do what I want," unquote. So that's the president. Please don't assume that he gets in and that he's going to fight and undo everything that we're living with now. His feet have to be held to the fire, okay? We can't, the Supreme Court, we can't trust. It hasn't helped us, right? The Senate, the Congress. Now, don't please assume that Biden will get in and everything will be better. So, I've been accused, yes, of sowing discord with my radical position that the right to legal, safe abortion must be nationwide, and we can't keep fighting these state-by-state battles. This is not a win-lose situation. Everybody gets excited, a referendum passes in one state or another, and then we won this or won. No, this is going to be a generational struggle, and we have to have the vision of a united movement, a united front that demands the right of legal, safe abortion, because it is the basis of women's human, constitutional, moral rights, okay? And I write in my book, I was appalled to see that instead of fighting to protect the right to abortion, a preemptive post-right strategic thinking was bubbling up among those I consider as allies. So the thinking was, if they ban abortion in certain states, we will raise money to pay for women to travel to pro-choice states. And even though, and of course, to get the pills to everyone. This is a Band-Aid. This is necessary now, but it's a Band-Aid. This is not sustainable. We can't afford to pay for women for the next years and years to travel to come to so-called safe states. We can't get the pills to everyone in this country. It is a Band-Aid. It is necessary, but we have to move beyond that. We can't fundraise our way out of this new legal second-class status. Choices is now seeing what I call abortion refugees. Before Dobbs, we were seeing about 5 to 7 patients from states that did not have legal safe abortion, that they could not get second trimester abortions. There were a lot of obstacles. Now we're seeing about 8 or 9 patients a week from these states. But again, this is not sustainable. There are wonderful feminist nonprofit centers that have collected enormous amounts of money, but this ends. It can't keep going on. And we have to realize, and I always think about the anti-abortion movement as their banner is white. You see, they're marching under this beautiful white banner for life and for God, because they're God's warriors. They're doing God's bidding and ensuring that every sperm and egg comes to fruition. They're saving babies. That's God's plan. You see, they have that vision. We don't have that. What I have, is a fundamental, deep faith in the ability and the right of women to choose. That's what we have. And I have a very profound belief, because of my powerful witness to over 1 million women in this last half century that I've seen making that choice. And I love this quote by Che Guevara. And he says, "At the risk of seeming ridiculous, let me say that the true revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love." Now, this love is the love of agape. It's not you love baseball, you love John. This is a love that transcends those. This is a love that says, I have to do it because it's the right thing to do, okay? It's a love of radical empathy. And this is what really goes on in the clinics. It goes on with the staff who serves the patients, and it has to go on in our politics. And we have to have the courage and the will and that radical form of love to really fight this struggle. In closing, I want to offer just a little bit of a synopsis of my manifesto for the post-Roe revolutionary. And one is, the right to legal, safe abortion is the front line and the bottom line of women's freedom and liberty. Feminism is the theory, legal abortion is the practice. Accept the current reality, accept the current legal reality, but do not normalize the loss of human and civil rights. Speak out every day. Come out of the abortion closet. If you've had one, share it. Talk to your family, talk to your friends, okay? And don't fund your own oppression. If you've had an abortion, again, speak up. You are not alone. And when has silence ever been a friend to justice? When has silence ever helped us? Flo Kennedy, a very dear friend, said to me when we talked about this, she would say, "Girl, you have to love the struggle. Love the struggle." And it is a struggle, and it is a process, and you've got to love it because it requires that. It requires that kind of love. All rights start with the body. The power of the state must stop at our skin. The opposition is relentless, and life is triggering. You're going to get triggered every time you wake up, right? So I always say practice courage. I always talk about courage being the prime virtue. Get up, get out there, do something, love into action. Think, love, action, action. And mourn for 10 minutes and then organize. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your history of how you came to the movement. And so I think a lot of people are wondering, okay, this is the reality, we have to accept it, and we also know we have to fight. But what are some tangible things that we can do, particularly with an election this November, to try and push back and get to a place where it's legally feasible to codify abortion as a human right federally?
Well, this is the great challenge. It's not possible now because of the way things are politically, but we have to keep that out as the vision. We have a vision, the goal, and then we have the strategy, and then the tactics. So we have to articulate the vision. Yes, this is good that we've won all these referendums. Yes, it's great that the polls come out like that. But we are moving towards the goal in a unified way of having legal abortion nationwide without borders. I don't know if Roe or an approximation of Roe is the answer, which is why I looked at other legal models. But we can't lose that vision. And if Biden gets in, his feet have to be held to the fire, and constant pressure, marching in the streets, get out there, make trouble, make good trouble.
What are some things we can actually do to hold his feet to the fire? Because I agree, we have to make sure that he recognizes how important this is to a great many women, the majority of women, in fact, and maybe encourage him to stop sharing his thoughts on abortion because I don't know that that's relevant.
I'm always one for massive street action. Massive street action. You know, I co-initiated Rise Up for Abortion Rights, and we were the only ones out there. If you remember seeing the green bandanas and all those radical actions, that was me and Sansara and Lori Sokol, because we had to bring attention. We did very many radical acts, and of course not, I mean, we're not going to have organizations like Planned Parenthood move into fundamentalist big churches, take their shirts off and say rights for abortion, but we could do that, and that's what we have to get into the streets, and it's amazing that nobody is out there. Amazing, you know. I just, so maybe, you know, I'll march and a couple of you will march.
Why do you think that is? Because we have taken to the streets in the past decade, and certainly historically, protest has been an important tool for revolution. Why do you think that Roe being overturned did not put people in the streets?
You know, that's such a good and very profound question. You know, why? When everyone says, you know how many, 1 out of 4 women will have an abortion in their lifetime. And then you think about their families and their friends and all of their communities. You know, it's as American as apple pie, abortion. Yet, you know, there's those outposts, there's still the shame, they don't want to come out of the closet. So that's part of it. The second part is that the activism on the war has taken up a lot of the energy. You know, that's where everybody seems to be demonstrating. And then again, women, not so important, I suppose. You know, I used to watch the Black Lives Matter. They were out there every single day, and we can discuss and debate what the real structural changes that brought, you know, may have not, but they were there. They were out there saying this has to change. Why are we not out there? I've said some of the things, and you know, it's the combination of the outposts in our heads, the shame, the narrative being defined by the opposition, all those things combine to allow people to sit this out. And I tell you, you can sit at your computer and do all the social media that you want. That is not revolution. That is not revolution, and that is not, you know, the courage of getting out there and doing something. And I don't say everybody has to march, but you have to do something. The first thing may be just talking to your family that you've never spoken to about this issue and saying, oh, you know, I heard this speaker the other day, and what do you think about it? You know, listening and then just slowly bringing it out. It's still, unfortunately, something that's stigmatized to that degree.
You mentioned during your talk that we can't fundraise our way out of this problem, which is, I think, important to hear because so often we are encouraged to contribute to Planned Parenthood, to abortion access funds, and so on. But at the same time, I do know that money does a lot of really important work for people who do need not only access to abortion, but the financial means to avail themselves of abortion. So how do we balance the need for money behind the movement with also recognizing that money is not enough?
By saying and really having people understand that this is a Band-Aid, this is a tactic that we have to use now. Because women are suffering, they can't have access, they don't have the economic ability. You know, the National Association of Abortion Funds is sitting on $41 million. That's a lot of money, and they have big administrative salaries, you know. But aside from that, you know, the pill is not the panacea. It's only up to 10 weeks. Not everybody is in a safe place to take it. And you can't just fall back on this is what we can do. Position it as it is. It is a temporary solution to the problem of women now being second-class citizens and not having fundamental human and civil rights, but they don't want to go there. You see, they don't want, because that's really what it is. That's what it is, Roxane.
Yes, indeed. Now, I'm sure the audience has questions, and so if you have a question, please feel free to throw a hand up and ask your question.
This is an interesting... Oh, God, years and years ago, I debated Nellie Hansen, who was a big anti-abortion leader, and I spoke to her afterwards. I said, why don't we get on the page of working with each other to reduce the number of abortions, right? Let's talk about birth control and contraception. When you put down the knives, we'll talk about it. That's what she says. And then she said, the pill is chemical warfare. I mean, you're right. Dobbs opens up the fight against contraception, the fight against LGBT people. I mean, it opens up a lot of doors to a lot of very negative strategies that will come down the road. The contraception, you just have to battle it in the same way that, with sperm and an egg, is not the image of God. What is all the masturbatory semen that's left on the ground? I mean, we have to get more creative, more radical, get in front of these legislators and, just put up some of these interesting and very radical propositions. But the issue is, like, as you say, Planned Parenthood. There's this attitude almost of, well, we're going to be good girls. I was glad to see, though, Roxane, that a few people from the Women's March were arrested the other day. But the problem with being arrested is that it's almost formulaic now. Everybody gets arrested, right? The celebrities are arrested. You go out there, it's they're arrested. They take you in, you pay a fine, you go home. I was arrested. I mean, I think it requires a little bit more than this now. But it was good that they did that. I was very pleased to see that they did that.
Yeah, definitely it's a step forward.
Right. Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. Now, do you think we could get a lot of people to do it? We don't know, right? And then I think about hunger strikes, but if you're not going to take it to the end, then it's just performance and you can't do it, you see? So, but you need, when you think about the suffragettes, right? You think about what they did. You think about the woman who ran and put herself in front of a horse. And I mean, that's when I talk about courage. I mean, it takes some of those kind of radical actions, not sometimes with great amounts of people, but I did the first pro-choice disobedience in front of St. Patrick, where 9 people were arrested just by, coming and putting up our proclamation and standing there. But that was a time when getting arrested meant something more. But I think we have to up that. I think we have to up it. Yeah. Because this egregious ruling in Florida, and I read you the statement of that woman when she said, you have to run. This is this country at this point in time in the year 2024. And we used to be the light, of reproductive choice and abortion, legal abortion. Countries would look to us. Now we look to them. We look to South America, and women are actually going to Mexico. When the first death after Medicaid was cut off was with somebody went to Mexico and was killed by a botched abortion. We have lost the vision of our democracy. In my mind, with this, we've really lost that. What is America, right? It's an idea, it's a vision, it's a utopian vision in a sense, and we have to look at ourselves and how far away we are actually from that vision. And we have moved very, very, very far away from this. So when they talk about the risk to democracy, what's happened now is very much that. And what this vision for this country was, it is no more. I don't see it being upheld now. Well, I could easily say you get in touch with what exists now, but I would say to you, create your own. put it out there saying, I want to do this, or I would like to, create a group that would do that. You can do this on your own too. There are definitely, you can tie into, multiple organizations that do marches that have all sorts of ways for you to get involved. I would also encourage you to do something on your own. If you really feel strongly, put it out there and saying, I'm having a meeting in my house, I'd like to just, or something like that, It's again, really important to act and to be strong and get out there. There's loads of things that you can go on a lot of different websites and they'll tell you even the choices and et cetera. You can volunteer, you can do this, you can do that. But if you really want to get moving, I would start something on my own. That's always been my way of doing it. I remember, many years ago, there was another tremendous threat to abortion rights, and I think one of the feminists was writing and speaking about, well, if you have to go into a state, or you live in a state where they will have a rape exemption, you have to say that you were raped. Use that and say you were raped. And Andrea Dworkin, who was at that time, we were talking about this, she went crazy because she said, if you say you were raped and you use rape as a tactic to get an abortion, because that may be the only, then you're totally disseminating the whole rape movement and the anti-violence movement. It's very complicated. I mean, we live in a rape culture, we live in a misogynistic culture, and these debates over exemptions for rape bring up interesting questions, and I wanted to think about, and I did research on it, why is it that they don't want to have the exemptions for rape? And when I read that comment from that man, that the seed doesn't have to be planting the seed, it's not the person who reaps the crop, that women's bodies are really just a resource, a total resource, like the earth. To be used, to be abused, to be, used as just a product and a source, and that's what it comes out. I don't like this whole idea of exemptions. There's good abortions and bad abortions. You have good reasons to have an abortion, or you have a bad reason to have an abortion. Your reasons are yours, and if I don't agree with them or anybody else doesn't, that's irrelevant, because everybody has their own reason in their own heart. And so, if you want to get your PhD, that should be an exemption. If you don't feel like being pregnant, that's an exemption,
Now, Ken Casey is the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yes, he is.
So it's interesting that people would consider him an authority on reproductive justice.
Well, they didn't consider him an authority, but the abortion came up in the discussion. And Nat Hentoff, who used to write for the Village Voice, right? He was very left, but he was anti-abortion. And what he used, the image that he used, he said, think of, it's like killing these little white seals, the baby seals. And you have a baby seal in your mind, this little puff of white fur with the big black eyes, somebody coming over, And that's what, to him, abortion was. But unfortunately, a fetus is not a baby seal, and the fetus was not in the mother. The baby seal was not in its mother's uterus, and that's really the difference. There's a bill that's being heard today in Tennessee about baby Olivia. There's actually a 3-minute video that's been created with a what do you say? A character like what is the word? Like a little comic character,
A cartoon?
A cartoon character of a fetus whose name is Baby Olivia. Okay, So this is a 3-minute video, and baby Olivia starts as a little, sperm and egg, and grows, and then the bad abortionist may come or whatever, and baby Olivia wants to live. They are looking to require that to be mandated viewing by all students in Tennessee, and it's also been passed in 3 other states. So you talk about taking over you. I mean,
Wow.
This is right.
Baby Olivia gets around.
She does, but you see, I really want you to understand that the agenda is to really create the fetus as a constitutional person, having as many rights, which may in fact at times trump the woman's or the mother's rights. So that's part of their basic agenda. And they will be as relentless and creative and as, aggressive as they've been in the last half century to the one coming up till they get what they want.
Is there a news source you recommend for staying up on all of the news of what's happening in individual states, like this Tennessee?
Yeah, there's Valente does abortion every day, and Jessica Valente, and I think she's on Substack. That's a good one, definitely a good one, because she posts every day and she goes into everything in the states and everything legally, et cetera, and she goes deep sometimes. So if you read that, you get it every day. Friday she takes off to look at one good thing. She does abortion every day. That's a good one too. I read that, and there's Abortion Now by McDermott. So yeah, those things can keep you up to date on all of the awful things that are happening around this country at this time. Listen, this is a really, really important question, because first of all, when you say ridiculous concepts, etc., right, if you're a logical person and you think scientifically based, of course they're ridiculous. If they're saying, God's imprint is on a sperm and an egg at the moment, of course they're ridiculous. But you have to understand they really believe this. And it's this diminution, this diminishment of them, just by that kind of thing that you're saying, that's created this inability. You have to know your enemy. And you really have to know your enemy, and you have to listen to them, and you have to understand them, so that you can subvert what they're doing and overcome what they're doing. The other problem is that there's so much misinformation. You go on, and who's curating this stuff? We have patients that come in, oh, well, I heard that, if I have an abortion, it'll cause me breast cancer. All of this BS that goes around, and it's very hard to cut through that. You're absolutely right. I stopped debating quite a long time ago, because after one of the doctors was killed, they wanted me to debate somebody on, that was saying, well, they had a right because, it was like Hitler, they were killing Hitler and killing. But I said, I won't go there, and I won't debate anymore, because you're not going to change their minds, that's for sure. And you're only speaking to your own supporters. So misinformation and the creation of real information is a real challenge in this system the way it is now. But I would listen, and don't diminish them, because that's a real problem when you're fighting. You have to know your enemy. And something, I have debated every leader of the antis and the right to life movement. I've dealt with them on many levels, and I have a respect for them, because they are out there, they believe what they believe, and they are fighting. Do you think the pro-choice people are out there every day like they are? They are not. They are not. They are out there, they are continually working, so they're in the public square because that's their belief. Now, do we have to oppose them? Do we have to finally eliminate that thinking if we can, or diminish it? Yes, but you have to understand why they think that way.
Well, thank you so much, Merle Hoffman. That, I think, gives us a lot of food for thought. Yes. And If you would like a copy of Merle's book, they are available for free out front, and she will
I'll
even
sign them.
sign the book. And I hope that everyone leaves here today feeling like they're going to do some marching.
Yeah, marching, thinking, talking, look in the mirror, ask yourself, what can I do? And thank you. It's been a pleasure to be at Rutgers, a pleasure to be hosted by you. Thanks a lot.